Hi guys, this is Cyril. You're welcome to the Cloud Journey HQ, and today I would like to make a presentation on the Microsoft Azure Cloud Storage, which is the Microsoft Blob Storage versus the Amazon S3 bucket. These two resources are provided by Microsoft and also by AWS respectively. So we're going to more like have a detailed comparison between these two resources and how the use cases are also used in the real world today. This is the part 2 of this video, which was already been done by a colleague from the AWS side, which he talked about the ACLs and also the bucket list. So today I'm just going to talk about how we could implement some file management, or should I say blob management, on the Microsoft Azure environment. So without further ado, let's dive right into this. Like we said earlier, this presentation will compare just the Microsoft Azure Blob Storage and the Amazon S3 bucket, and we are going to then try to check the storage architecture, the security features that both of them has, and also the performance and pricing, and lastly the use case for each of them. So um, the next thing we have is the overview concept. So for the Microsoft Azure Blob Storage, yeah, we have the Azure Blob Storage is really a scalable object storage service, which is provided by Microsoft, like I said earlier, and it's designed to store large amount of data, which is like blob storage, file storage. But in this part, we are going to focus on blob storage, right? So blob storage has unstructured data capabilities to store these files like image, videos, logs, and backup. Blob is an acronym of the binary long data. It's more like a data type. So it allows us to store binary large objects, which are unstructured data. While in the other hand, the OWS also allows us to store objects as well, and it allows us to store and retrieve data from anywhere. And it's also popular uh, for workloads in today's technology. So we are also going to the next slide just to see what we have. So in the next slide, we are going to learn about the storage architecture, which is a deep dive into this. So for the storage architecture, the Microsoft Azure Blob use a hierarchical namespace. So for this Microsoft Azure Storage, you need to first create your Azure Storage account before you create your container. Then after that, you then upload your blobs or your objects or your files into it. So these are more like the hierarchy you get to save your files into the Microsoft Azure environment. But for the AWS side, it uses a flat namespace. So you get to just create your bucket, which is your S3 bucket, right? So when you're done with that, you then upload your objects, which are like the files you're trying to upload, your own structured data you want to upload into it. All right, so this brings us to the next thing, which is costs. So when it comes to cost and classes, or should I say access tier for storage account, for Microsoft Azure, we have the auth tier, which is more like a blob tier that you get to access your file frequently, and it's also judged based on that pricing model too, or that access tier you use. So we have the cool tier as well for Microsoft, and it's more like you get to access your file less frequently, so you can work with lesser cost as well. And we have archive tier. So with archive tier, you get to have to access your data for a longer time frame. So for you to get your data to be either in hot or cool tier, you need to do what they call rehydration. So you have to rehydrate your files to go back to hot or cool tier. But however, the archive tier may have a long time data retention. So yeah, so but for AWS, I think there are also the S3 Glacier Deep Archive and also the S3 Infrequent Access, other classes that it has in their own side. All right, so since we've already seen this part of storage, let's go into the security and access control. So for the security side of things, which I'm going to also do practically, we have the shared access signature, which is more like a temporary access key for specific blob. And we also have the Azure AD, which is Azure Active Directory Authentication as well, which you can use to access your blob data or even your file share data or from Microsoft Azure storage. And we have the rollback access control, which is the fine-grained permission for you to access. So you could actually check your IAM to see your user permissions. So if you have your service administrator role, or should I say your SMB or storage account contributor role, then you should be able to carry out some read and write operations. However, for AWS, you could have your IAM policy, right, which is similar to the RBAC. So it gives you the access to the users that are in the subscription to see if you have the permissions to really access those data. Then with that, you can also create policies for that. So then also we have the access control list. So these define the access permissions for your storage. Then we also have the bucket policy, which you can do for your storage account as well. All right, so now let's go into the performance. So for performance and availability, the Microsoft Azure Blob Storage provides the geo redundancy, which is GRS, and it's more like you having to save your files in different regions. So for high availability, in case of disaster, you could actually leverage this approach for performance. We have the zonal redundancy, which is for storing your data into multiple regions, availability zones rather, within a region. So that's for zonal redundancy. And we have LRS, which is just to replicate your data within a single data center, right? So it's not really high for high availability, but then it's more like it's quite affordable for your use case. However, for AWS, they provide 99.99 availability. So it's kind of give you very high uptime because it's more like you having to have a zonal redundancy for your storage account by default. All right, so we have cross-region replications for higher disaster recovery as well for AWS. So for us to go into the last stage, which is the pricing. So the Microsoft Azure Blob Storage actually judge you based on your storage type, which, as I said, how frequent do you access this data? Like you have hot tier, we have cool tier, we have archive tier. Then also based on the action, like how do you read data from this blob? How do you get to write data from this blob? And lastly, your egress. So how often does your data really go out from your blob storage? So you get to charge you for that. Why for the AWS they charge based on the storage class, which is how like the same thing I just explained, and also how you get to access your data from it. So it's kind of similar though from one indication. So these are just like the re-rundown of how these work. So for the use case is you get to see that the Microsoft Azure is ideal for the Azure based application, right? And it's still used for similar roles like the AWS from what we see. And when you see properly, you notice that they can be used for backup, they can be used for analytics, for data lakes, also used for IoT workloads. So you could actually have your time series data stored on your blob storage as well. Then for AWS, you get to also use them for AWS workloads, for big data lake, and also for big data analysis. Then yeah, like lastly, you can also save your data repository for your data lakes file as well. So yeah, both of them are blob storage resource, and I believe you've learned one or two things from this. So let's go into the practical for Microsoft Azure Blob and see how we can manage the access and also read and write from it going forward. All right, so you're welcome to the Azure portal. So in this environment, we are going to create a container. So we've already created an Azure storage account at this point. So I don't want to take our time in the whole creation process from the Azure environment. So what we just need to do is to create a container. inside the storage account. So whenever you create storage account, like I said, the Microsoft Azure has an hierarchical namespace. So you get to create a storage account before you create your container. Then you then put your blobs into them, like your files, right? All right, so let's create a container. So we just click on this environment and you could just call this container name, maybe uh, still loading. So you can say tests blob to okay, okay, fine. So allow that. So we can create this. So once you create this, it's going to populate underneath this. So we have already two containers, which is by default log and trans blob, which I had initially. But I just created this, which is test blob, and there's nothing inside of this bucket. So this container is more like a logical container that holds all our blobs. So like, let me go back. When you see the details for this particular container, you notice that it has a private access. So I just wanted to populate back. So you see what we have in the description for this column. So when we see this part, it was created this particular time and the anonymous access is still private and available. Okay. All right. So for us to be able to read write data from it, first, when we create this part, I'm going to upload one blob. Let's see. All right, so the environment where we get to upload our files as populated. So we just need to click on browse files to locate where the files are so we can upload it here. So I'm going to just go to my downloads. I already have a folder that I created earlier and the folder is called file blobs. So I just need to select this. So I have this picture, I have this one. So you could just click on this. I think I could mark two. Okay, just two pictures. Then all right, so I just marked two files to upload into my blob container. So when I click on the upload button, for example, you notice that the two files are already there. So you have my serial passport ID and you have the EuroBG. All right, so these two, they are in the auth tier, which are frequently accessed files blob. So I can click on this. Just click on this just to see if I can find the URL. If we try to access this, like if we try to access this from a browser, for example, this is like the URL for this file. We're trying to access it from the URL, so you might not be able to access it like from the browser environment. So if you come to this end and you say paste, for example, it's probably going to give you an error message. Why? Because you do not really have that permission. So the public access is not permitted on this storage account at the moment. So for us to really work on the public access, we need to do some modifications from the blob end. So let's do the right modifications. All right, so we go to the blob environment and see where the permissions are to be. So in the other section, my colleague went about creating an ACL, which is going to be for just the blob alone. But in this case, we could change the access level. So for you to change the access level, you just click on this environment and switch from private anonymous access to public. But at this portion, you notice that it's kind of grayed out. So it means that no one is going to see your files. So we can't do anything at this point. So what we need to do is probably go back once more and find the configuration environment of the storage account itself. So the storage account is actually blocking the activities you're trying to achieve here. So we need to go back to the storage account. So let's try to locate the storage account settings so we can change the configurations to allow us to either set for the blob or the container itself. So unlike AWS that gives us the bucket policy. So in this part here, you come to configuration. So this is going to load settings for you to allow access to anonymous. So you can click on enable, then save. So once you save this environment, this will just give you the environment where you could then try to choose what you want, like based on how. Okay, fine, you successfully updated. So let's scroll up. So you can access your blob either from storage browser or from your data storage. So this is container. These are the container file share queue table, but we just want this container. So let's go back to containers. So if it's load up, we just go to this blob, for example. Now, when you mark this and you come to this access level, now you see that you don't have any grayed out environment here. So if you click down, it tells you that do you want for blob, which is anonymous read access for blobs only, or do you want the container, which is the anonymous read access for container and blobs. So this is just trying to tell us that do we want it for just containers or for blobs only, right? So it depends on you, right? So I just want it just for all files in the containers and blobs as well. So I could use this, but for more security, you could just use for all files in the blobs alone. So let me set for this one currently, and um, okay, so I've set for this container, right? So it means that any file I put in this container, I should have access to it. So if I come to this part where I have this link and I refresh, so yeah, you can see we have this picture already showing on the screen. So what if we try to get for this other one, just to see if we can really access it, because we change the access level. So it's called containers, which is to read access for containers and blobs. So it's by default in all of them now. So let's see. You can come to, you can also, let's see if we can get the URL for this as well. Okay, it's kind of, okay, it's loading. So you copy this, then let's see. Yeah. So this is going to open. Now you see that I can be able to view my pictures, right? I don't have those permission issues. What if I want to download it? I can also download it, right? Because there is also a download button in the blob environment, which I think I saw when I was about to get the link. So when we go to this blob environment, for example, let's say this one here, you see it opens the link and other details regarding this. So we can still carry out the download if we want to, but we can, yeah, so this is the download environment. We can download it from here. And if we don't want to even use this idea of using your change access level, we could still go ahead to do what they call shared access token. So this is another privilege it's giving us, right? So it gives us a privilege where we can say, I want to just access this particular blob for a particular time frame, and I want you to either just have access to it, either to read or write from it. So you can create the policy yourself, or if you want to, you can create a policy yourself for this particular container. But you can just use the normal permissions of read and write alone from it. Then once you're done with that, you give it the time and duration you want the permissions to go for, like 24 hours. Then you click on create SaaS token. So when you click on create SaaS token for this blob container, it generates it and you see that we have everything here. So this is what we have currently. All right, so it gives us this read and write for, yeah, for the blob access level, or you can use your SAS token, which is a temporary access to your blobs. These are the two provided by Microsoft. And also, like I said, we have the control policy, which is RBAC, which is your role-based access control, trying to tell if you have maybe a contributor role to your storage account, or you have a service administrator role to your storage account. So these can give you that permissions to know if you are even eligible to be able to see these files. So if you click on view my access, for example, if you're not the administrator of the account, you probably should be either contributor role um, or reader of the account. So in my own case, when I click on view my access, it's going to populate as well and show me what I have as an my okay. So I think it's loading, yeah. So yeah. So once I click on view my access, it's going to show what role I have in this account. So if you see what I have, it shows that I have the service administrator role, and which has the full access to the resource in the subscription as well. So yeah, so I hope you learned something from this, and I'll see you in the next video going forward. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel, and bye for now.